All right, so we're taking on a pretty slippery topic today, trying to talk about the Tao. Kind of feels like, trying to grab smoke in your hand.
Yeah, it does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But what I find most interesting about it is that when you try to define the Tao, you almost violate what it's all about,
Okay, right.
Like it says in Lita Setsti, that's the source we're looking at today, by the way.
Yeah.
It says Tao that can be named is not the real Tao.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I mean, have you ever had that experience where, like, you try to define something, I don't know, beauty or freedom, and the minute you try to put it into words, it just kind of loses something?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's almost like you're taking it apart to figure out how it works, but in the process of taking it apart, you lose the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's like you're dissecting a butterfly to try to figure out why it's so beautiful, and you just end up with a mess.
Exactly.
So how do we even begin to approach something like the Tao? And I mean, that's what I really appreciate about Leteti Texti. It digs into those limitations. Like, how do we, even as humans, perceive the world around us? And how do we deal with these paradoxes? Because there's so many when you're trying to talk about something that's essentially beyond definition.
That's a great point. And the text actually emphasizes that. Paradoxes. It doesn't treat them as roadblocks or obstacles, but actually as opportunities for growth.
Oh, I like that.
Like they actually propel us forward. So when we encounter these things that challenge our assumptions and they force us to kind of shift perspective, like that's where the real learning happens,
Like one of those optical illusions where you see one image and then all of a sudden it flips and you see something totally different, but it's the same image.
Exactly. Yeah. And that reminds me, Leteti Texti actually uses a really beautiful analogy to describe this. The transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly.
Oh, yeah. Perfect example.
It's like this messy, uncomfortable process, but then ultimately it leads to something much more beautiful and expansive, right? And that actually ties in directly to another paradox that the text explores, which is time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like we can intellectually understand Einstein's theory of relativity.
Right.
We can kind of grasp the idea that time isn't absolute, but have we really integrated that into our being, into our experience?
Hold on. So you're saying there's a difference between like our minds understanding it and our deeper selves actually experiencing it. Like it's theoretical, but not actually lived.
Exactly. That's it. Our lived experience needs to kind of catch up. So while we may grasp the concept intellectually, Leteti Texti suggests that we haven't fully integrated that fourth dimension time into our being. And you know what? It actually gets into some really cool techniques for how we can actually start to shift our perception of time, which I think we should dive into a little bit later.
Oh, I'm totally down for that. But before we do, there's another point in Leteti Texti that really stood out to me. And that's, it talks about how blindly following teachers or experts, without questioning anything, can actually prevent us from truly understanding the Tao.
Oh, that's such an important point to bring up. And I think it speaks to this idea of self-reliance, Like, we're so used to seeking external validation. We always want that one right answer. But we kind of forget about the power of self-inquiry, And let's not forget, we're talking about the Tao here, something that's constantly changing, constantly in flux. It defies fixed interpretations, right?
So is it more about the journey of exploration rather than like arriving at that one definitive answer? Like trying to catch a river in a bucket. You might get a little bit of the water, but the river just keeps on flowing.
Precisely. And Leteti Texti is constantly reminding us of this. It's not static, it's dynamic, it's a process. And this leads to another limitation that we have to be aware of, which is our senses. The text actually highlights how our perception of reality is filtered through our senses, our memories, our biases. So what we perceive as reality might not actually be reality. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, because it's like we're realizing that the world we see is just our brain's interpretation of it, not necessarily the objective truth.
Exactly. And it really challenges our assumptions about objectivity, even in fields like science where we strive for it. Leteti Texti gives a really interesting example. The human eye.
Right.
It doesn't actually perceive reality directly. It only sees the light that bounces off objects. And then it's our brains that interpret that light and create the images that we see.
Whoa. So even with all our rigorous methods and technology, there's still that element of subjectivity that can't be totally eliminated.
That's right. It seems like Liteti Texti is pushing us towards this pretty radical shift, moving away from this outside-in approach to knowledge to an inside-out one.
Yeah.
And it's about cultivating awareness internally instead of constantly seeking knowledge from external sources.
Got it.
Imagine you're trying to understand how a complex machine works.
Okay.
You wouldn't just look at the outside, right?
Right.
You'd want to explore its inner workings, see how the mechanisms function. And that's kind of what cultivating inner awareness is like.
I like that. And this is where it starts to get really interesting. Because Liteti Texti suggests that we all possess this incredible creative power within our own minds.
That's right. Our thoughts, our beliefs, they actually shape our reality. And the text refers to this as creating these imaginary worlds, but these worlds, they have a very real impact on our lives. Think about it like those self-fulfilling prophecies, If you're constantly telling yourself you're going to fail, chances are you probably will. But the opposite is also true. If you focus on positive thoughts, you're more likely to create positive experiences.
So it's not just about understanding the Tao out there, but understanding the power of our own minds to create our own reality. That's a pretty empowering, but also maybe a little scary idea, isn't it? So how do we reconcile that with the idea that the Tao is something bigger than ourselves?
That's such a great question, and it's one that Liteti Texti tackles head-on. It uses this imagery of the Tao as a mirror. It reflects back to us, our own unique perspectives. And so, if every reflection is different, can any one reflection be more correct than another?
That's a really cool image. I mean, it seems like trying to pin down the Tao with one definition misses the point entirely, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. The journey itself is where the real transformation happens, It's about the continual unfolding, the exploration of our own unique reflections in the mirror of the Tao.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. This is all super fascinating, but before we go too much further, I'm curious, what does your own reflection reveal to you? Like, what have you learned about yourself through exploring the Tao?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think we all need to reflect on, But before I answer, I think it's worth diving a little deeper into this concept of interior development that Liteti Texti keeps coming back to. I think it's key to understanding how we can align our own individual journeys with this larger flow of the Tao.
Okay, I'm totally down for that. Lead the way.
Okay, so we've talked about how the Tao is, well, it's this ever-changing, undefinable force, and we each experience it in our unique way, right? But Liteti Texti seems to suggest that there's also this, collective aspect to it, like a shared journey of what it calls interior development that we're kind of all on, even if we don't realize it.
Hold on, so we're all reflecting the Tao differently, but somehow there's this, shared path of development happening underneath it all. That sounds kind of paradoxical in itself.
Yeah, it totally is. And Liteti Texti actually addresses that paradox directly. It says, my Tao is different from your Tao, emphasizing how individual our experiences are. But then at the same time, there's this underlying current of shared evolution, like we're all kind of striving towards understanding this force we call the Tao, even if we experience it in different ways.
It's kind of like we're all sailing across the same vast ocean, but in different boats with different destinations in mind.
Yeah.
But we're all being influenced by the same currents, the same tides, the same weather patterns.
That's a brilliant analogy. I love that. And Liteti Texti actually suggests that this diversity of experiences, it's not a bad thing, It actually enriches our understanding of the Tao because it's through this interplay of individual perspectives that we can appreciate the Tao in all its complexity more fully.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But, Liteti Texti throws in some pretty dense terms here. It talks about interior seeing, self-inquiry, and even dissolving misbeliefs.
Yeah.
What do those concepts even mean, and how do they help us navigate this whole interior development thing?
Right, those are some big words. Essentially, what Liteti Texti is encouraging is a shift from seeking external validation, looking for answers outside of ourselves, to really going inward. It's about developing awareness of our own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, and how they actually shape the reality that we experience. So instead of just blindly accepting what we're told, we need to develop our own interior seeing, our own capacity for discerning what's true for us.
So it's about questioning assumptions, right? Like challenging our beliefs, becoming more critical about what we accept as truth. That's a pretty radical level of self-reliance, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's what Liteti Texti is really getting at. And it can be uncomfortable, even unsettling to challenge those deep ingrained beliefs that we've held for so long. The text actually uses this phrase, dissolving misbeliefs, which I think is really interesting. It's about letting go of ideas that no longer serve us, that might be hindering our understanding of the Tao and our place in it all.
Sounds like a pretty intense process.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of guidance does Leteti Texti offer for actually doing that inner work? Like, how do we actually go about it?
Well, it points to self-inquiry as a key practice, which is deep, honest questioning about our experiences, our motivations, our values. It's about cultivating curiosity, openness, and willingness to explore the depths of our own consciousness without, fear or judgment.
So instead of looking for answers out there in the world, we're turning inward and asking those tough questions of ourselves. Does Leteti Texti give us any specific questions to ask, or like a framework for how to do that?
Well, it doesn't give a prescriptive list of questions, but it does emphasize the cyclical nature of this whole journey, what it calls looping awareness.
Looping awareness, that's a new one. What exactly does that mean?
It refers to the idea that we're constantly moving through these cycles of experience, learning, and growth. We face challenges, right? We make mistakes, we gain insights, and then the cycle begins again, but at a higher level of awareness.
So it's like a spiral staircase, kind of. Like
Yeah.
each loop brings us closer to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the Tao, even though we never really arrive at a final destination.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And the source suggests that the cyclical process isn't something to be afraid of. It's actually something to be embraced. It's through these loops of experience and reflection that we gain wisdom, We refine our understanding. We move closer to the Tao, even though we might never be able to fully define it.
Okay, this is starting to make a lot of sense. But let's be real for a minute, Most of us, we live in a world that really values external achievement and validation. So how do we cultivate this interior development amidst all the demands of daily life? All those pressures to succeed, to achieve, to constantly be doing. Leteti Texti kind of acknowledges this, right? It even mentions the Western lifestyle as a potential obstacle.
You're right, it does. And it argues that this emphasis on material success, personal branding, external validation can actually distract us from the inner work that needs to be done.
So how do we break free from that? Like escape from the matrix of expectations, Leteti Texti uses this interesting phrase, differentiate as individuals. What does that even mean in this context?
Yeah, that's a really interesting phrase, isn't it? I think it's about recognizing our own unique path, our own individual calling, and not getting swept up in the tide of societal pressures and expectations. It's about making choices that align with our values and prioritizing practices that nurture our inner awareness, even if they don't lead to external rewards or recognition.
So it's about being more discerning about where we focus our energy and attention, right? Like creating space for this interior development amidst all the external noise.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices about what we consume, what we believe, what we prioritize in our lives. And it's about cultivating a sense of inner stillness amidst the external chaos so that we can hear the whispers of our own intuition and connect with those deeper truths that reside within us.
Okay, so it's not about withdrawing from the world completely, but about cultivating a more conscious, mindful relationship with it. How does Leteti Texti suggest we do that? Like, are there any specific practices or approaches it recommends?
Well, the text really emphasizes this idea of developing our capacity for differentiation, which is essentially the ability to distinguish between what truly nourishes our soul versus what just distracts us or depletes us,
So it's like developing a mental filter that allows us to tune out all that noise and focus on what really matters.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about cultivating awareness of our thoughts, our emotions, our reactions, so that we can make conscious choices about what we allow into our inner space. And recognizing that true fulfillment comes not from external achievements, but from aligning our actions with our deepest values and cultivating that sense of inner peace and purpose.
That's a really powerful message. But Leteti Texti also points out that our egotistical desires can be a major obstacle on this path. What exactly does that mean, and how do we overcome those desires? Because, let's be honest, we all have them, right?
Right, we do. So in this context, ego refers to that part of us that's really driven by external validation, status, a sense of separateness from others. It's that voice in our head that's constantly comparing, judging, and seeking approval.
So it's that nagging feeling of not enough that so many of us struggle with.
Exactly. And Leteti Texti suggests that these egotistical desires can trap us in a cycle of, striving and dissatisfaction. They prevent us from accessing the deeper peace and wisdom that lies within us.
But hold on, isn't ambition a good thing? Like, don't we need a healthy ego to achieve our goals, to contribute to the world? How does Leteti Texti address that?
That's a great point. And it's important to clarify that the text isn't advocating for, eradicating the ego completely. It's more about recognizing its limitations and not letting it dictate our actions or define our worth. It's about finding that balance between our desire for achievement and our soul's yearning for connection and purpose.
So it's not about suppressing ambition, but about aligning it with our deeper values and letting go of the need for external validation.
Precisely. Leteti Texti suggests that by shifting our focus from external rewards to inner fulfillment, we can unlock a more authentic and sustainable source of motivation and purpose.
This is all really resonating with me. I'm starting to see how these egotistical desires can really cloud our interior seeing, and prevent us from connecting with those deeper truths that the Tao reveals. But how do we even begin to recognize those patterns within ourselves? Like those moments when our ego is kind of running the show.
Leteti Texti offers some clues. It talks about paying attention to our sense perception, our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions to the world around us, like really becoming aware of what's happening within us.
So it's about becoming more mindful, more self-aware, and noticing when those ego-driven patterns start to emerge.
Exactly. It's about cultivating self-awareness and noticing when those voices of comparison, judgment, or insecurity start to creep in.
So instead of trying to push those voices away, we just observe them, kind of get curious about them, and try to understand where they're coming from. Does Leteti Texti give us any tools for working with those patterns once we've recognized them?
It does. It introduces this really fascinating concept of imaginary worlds that we create with our minds. It argues that our thoughts and beliefs actually shape our reality, the stories we tell ourselves, the meaning we assign to events, the images we hold in our minds. These all contribute to the world we experience.
So it's like we're all living in our own personalized movies, and our thoughts are the screenwriters. But if that's the case, do we have any control over the genre of the movie? Like, can we change the script from a horror film to a comedy, so to speak?
That's a brilliant analogy. And to answer your question, yes. Leteti Texti argues that we absolutely have the power to rewrite our scripts. It suggests that these imaginary worlds can either liberate us or imprison us, depending on the quality of our thoughts.
So if we're constantly dwelling on negative thoughts, fears, and limitations, we're essentially creating a reality that reflects those beliefs. But if we can shift our focus to more positive, empowering thoughts, we can rewrite the narrative and experience a different reality.
Exactly. The text really emphasizes the power of conscious thought. And it's not about denying the challenges in life, but it's about choosing a more empowering and constructive way to perceive and respond to them.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. By cultivating that interior seeing and recognizing those imaginary worlds we create with our minds, we can start to break free from those ego-driven patterns that cloud our perception and prevent us from connecting with the deeper wisdom of the Tao.
That's a great summary of what Leteti Texti is trying to convey. It's about recognizing the power of our own minds to shape our reality and using that power to align ourselves with the Tao, even if we can never fully grasp or define it.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I have to admit, it's a lot to process. I'm starting to feel like I need a mental map to navigate all of these concepts.
I understand. It's like we've been exploring this vast, uncharted territory of consciousness.
Right. We've talked about paradoxes, the limitations of our senses, the power of imaginary worlds that shift from an outside-in to an inside-out perspective, this whole idea of looping awareness. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is. But let's try to distill some key takeaways from what we've discussed so far that can serve as, guideposts on this journey of interior development.
Okay, I'm ready for a little synthesis here. Hit me with those key insights.
Well, first and foremost, I think Leteti Texti is really inviting us to embrace paradox. The Tao, by its very nature, is full of contradictions. So trying to define it too rigidly, to hold on to fixed ideas about it, that's just going to lead to frustration.
So it's about letting go of the need for certainty and embracing the mystery.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there are multiple truths, multiple perspectives, and that the journey is just as important as the destination, if not more so.
Okay, that's a good starting point. What else?
Another key takeaway is the importance of cultivating inner awareness.
Right.
Shifting our focus from external validation to internal exploration. It's about learning to observe our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs without judgment. and recognizing how they shape our reality.
So it's about becoming the observer of our own minds, rather than constantly being swept away by the current of our thoughts.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's about developing that meta-awareness, that awareness of awareness that allows us to see things from a more detached, objective perspective.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Another crucial insight is recognizing that we're all creators. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our expectations, they have a profound impact on the reality we experience. So, by consciously choosing our thoughts, we can shape our lives in more positive and fulfilling ways.
So it's not about denying the challenges of life, but it's about choosing a more empowering lens through which to view them, right?
That's the essence of it. It's about recognizing that our thoughts have power. And by consciously choosing our thoughts, we can literally shape our reality in more positive and fulfilling ways.
This is all really starting to make sense. But there's one part that I'm still kind of wrestling with. The source keeps talking about the importance of, like, unfolding the patterns or loops that hold us back. What exactly does that mean? And how do we even begin to identify those patterns in our own lives?
That's a great question. So what the source is essentially pointing to are those repetitive cycles of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that can keep us stuck in unproductive patterns. It's about recognizing the ways in which we might be, unconsciously sabotaging ourselves or repeating old patterns that no longer serve us.
So it's like those recurring themes that keep popping up in our lives, even if we try to ignore them.
Exactly. It could be relationship patterns, career choices, or even ways of thinking and reacting to the world. The key is to start paying attention to those recurring themes and ask ourselves some tough questions about why they keep showing up.
So it's about becoming more self-aware,
Yeah.
right? Noticing those patterns as they emerge.
That's the first step. And once we start recognizing those patterns, we can begin to explore the underlying beliefs, fears, or unmet needs that might be driving them.
So it's not just about changing our behavior, but about understanding those deeper roots of those patterns.
That's crucial. By addressing the root cause, we can create lasting change and break free from those self-limiting cycles.
Okay, starting to see how all this fits together. But the source also mentions the importance of differentiating the essence from the substance when it comes to our experiences. What does that even mean?
That's a powerful concept. So what the source is inviting us to do is to look beyond the surface level of our experiences, beyond the substance of those loops, and connect with the deeper meaning, the essence that lies beneath.
So it's like peeling back the layers of those recurring patterns, like those optical illusions we were talking about earlier, to discover the deeper wisdom they hold, like seeing the same image, but in a new way.
Exactly. So the substance refers to the external form of those loops, the specific events, people, or circumstances that trigger them. But the essence is the deeper meaning, the lessons we can learn, the growth that can emerge from those experiences.
So even challenging experiences, even those loops that seem to cause us pain, can hold valuable lessons if we're willing to look for the essence within them.
Absolutely. Lieti Texti suggests that by focusing on the essence, we can actually extract wisdom from even the most difficult situations. And we can use those insights to fuel our personal growth and to further our understanding of the Tao.
Okay, this is starting to click for me.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do this? How do we shift our focus from the substance to the essence in our daily lives?
Well, the source really points to the importance of cultivating that awareness of awareness, that meta-awareness we were talking about earlier that allows us to observe our thoughts, emotions, and reactions from a more detached perspective.
So it's like stepping back from the movie screen of our minds and observing the projector that's creating the images.
That's a great way to visualize it. By cultivating this meta-awareness, we can begin to detach from the drama of our thoughts and emotions and see them more objectively.
But how do we actually do that? It sounds like a pretty advanced skill.
It is, but it's a skill that can be developed with practice. And mindfulness meditation is one really powerful tool that can help us cultivate that. By simply observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can start to create space between ourselves and the content of our minds.
So it's not about stopping our thoughts altogether, but it's about changing our relationship to them.
Exactly. By learning to observe our thoughts and feelings without getting swept away by them, we can start to see them as transient phenomena rather than solid, unchanging truths.
This is starting to make sense. But how do we connect this awareness of awareness back to the Tao and this idea of interior development?
Well, Leteti Texti suggests that this ability to differentiate the essence from the substance is crucial for understanding the Tao. It's about recognizing that the Tao is not a fixed object, or concept, but rather a dynamic process of unfolding and becoming.
So it's like trying to grasp the essence of a river. You can't capture it in a bottle, but you can experience its flow, its power, its ever-changing nature.
That's a beautiful analogy, and the source suggests that by cultivating this awareness of awareness, we can begin to tune in to the subtle whispers of the Tao within ourselves and in the world around us.
So it's not about finding a definitive answer to the question, what is the Tao?
Uh-huh.
But rather about embarking on an ongoing journey of exploration and discovery.
That's the heart of it. And Leteti Texti actually goes even further, suggesting that this journey of interior development isn't just about personal transformation. It's about contributing to the evolution of consciousness as a whole.
So by doing our own inner work, we're actually contributing to a larger shift in human consciousness.
Yeah.
That's a pretty inspiring idea.
It is, and it speaks to the interconnected nature of reality, the idea that we're all part of this larger web of consciousness that's constantly evolving and expanding.
That really makes you think about your own role in this larger process of evolution. So what specific practices or tools does Leteti Texti actually recommend for cultivating this awareness of awareness and deepening our connection with the Tao?
The text actually mentions several. It talks about self-inquiry, mindfulness meditation, and paying attention to our sense perception. And it also emphasizes the importance of looping awareness, that cyclical process of experiencing, reflecting, and integrating new insights that we talked about earlier.
So not about finding one magic bullet, but rather about engaging in a variety of practices that support our inner growth and development.
Exactly. And Leteti Texti suggests that the specific practices that resonate with us, well, they're going to vary from person to person. The key is to find practices that feel authentic, that feel supportive, and then to commit to them with consistency and dedication.
Okay, so we've got this toolbox of practices we can draw from. But I remember Leteti Texti also kind of cautions against blindly accepting anyone's interpretation of the Tao, even so-called experts. How do we approach teachings about the Tao without falling into that trap of blind faith?
Right, and that brings us back full circle to where we started. Tao that can be named is not the real Tao. It's a reminder to be wary of anyone claiming to have the definitive answer, the one true path.
So even on this journey of self-discovery, we need to be discerning. We need to trust our own inner compass, right?
Absolutely. It's about cultivating that interior seeing, that capacity to discern truth from illusion, It's about listening to our own inner wisdom and not being afraid to question anything that doesn't resonate with our deepest truth.
So it's like the Tao is this vast, ever-shifting landscape, and each of us is creating our own unique map as we explore it. There's no one right way to do it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And there is no right or wrong way to do it. The journey is about the continual unfolding, the exploration, the discovery of our own unique relationship with the Tao.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. Leteti Texti certainly offers a lot to unpack, but I think their parting message is perfect for our listeners, and it goes back to that first line. The Tao that can be named is not the real Tao, but the search for it, the exploration, the cultivation of inner awareness, that's where the real magic happens. So to all of our listeners out there, keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep trusting that inner voice that's guiding you on your own unique path.